This week has been absolutely crazy. Final Fantasy XIV extending their free trial all the way up until the end of Heavensward, the announcement of PSO2 New Genesis, Genshin Impact official launch date, a new Fable game? Man! But you know what? That is actually all content to look forward to in the future. That does not affect us right here, right now. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about 10 free-to-play MMORPGs that you can play right now, right this very moment. 10 that you probably haven't played, or almost 10 that you probably haven't played, that you should definitely play, or at least definitely try out whilst waiting for the aforementioned games, right? These are 10 MMORPGs that I do not include in another video, in another top 10 list for the entire rest of the year, with very, very few exceptions. With this knowledge, please be aware that I may have included one of your favorite free-to-play MMOs in a previous list sometime earlier during the year. So if you're looking for that game in specific, you might want to go ahead and check out a previous list from a previous month. Now, let's go ahead and jump in. No, actually, wait, before we go ahead and jump in, I would like to talk about today's sponsor, Entropia Universe. Have you ever wanted to be the commander of your very own ship? Have you ever felt like traversing the infinite depths of space, exploring hostile worlds, conquering entire galaxies, combating fearsome-looking fire-breathing giant lizards? Oh, you have? Sweet. Then I have just a free-to-play game for you. Welcome to Entropia Universe, a world, no, more than a world, a massive, endless universe filled with countless opportunities. Go off on adventures, seek out and hunt the universe's most dangerous monsters, mine for resources, join up with a group of space pirates, all the while earning real-life money off of your efforts in-game. This is more than just your average game, this is a second life for you. If any of this sounds interesting to you, then I recommend going ahead and clicking that link in the description of the pinned comment below. It'll take you right to download the game. And who knows, this could potentially be your new home, and you might never want to leave. I included this in the very first video I did back at the beginning of the year, but I continue to get comment after comment on every single follow-up video I have done asking why I didn't include Guild Wars 2 in this month's list, so here it is again. Guild Wars 2 is an interesting free-to-play title. It initially launched as a buy-to-play MMORPG, but then adopted a free-to-play business model after they found that it was not a sustainable long-term strategy. What seemed to work for ArenaNet is having the entire base game of Guild Wars 2 as a free title, while making each expansion, and therefore the most recent content and the most recent features available as paid expansions, for players that were interested in continuing beyond what they experienced within the base game. Guild Wars 2 is arguably one of the, if not the best free-to-play MMO on the market. The game utilizes a large segregated world filled with beautiful environments. Zones are locked to certain level ranges, meaning that if you enter a zone, you're synced down to the maximum level appropriate to the zone you're in. This is one of the few instances of this being done in an MMO outside of dungeons or raids, and this type of level scaling promotes an unusual sense of camaraderie among players, since to complete objectives out in the world in each individual zone, you're often required to work together, because you can't just be a max level character going back to lower level zones and one-shotting everything. Combat is a very unique blend of action and tab target, definitely not true action combat like Black Desert or Vindictus, but also not tab target like WoW or Final Fantasy XIV. Here is a relic from an age long since past. Fiesta Online is one of the few anime MMOs that I really enjoyed back in the day. It was so difficult, but also packed with players everywhere. It's honestly a little disheartening seeing the state that the game is in these days, absolutely barren of life, but and I bet many of you guys as well, have pretty fond memories of your journeys, of your experiences within the game. It used to be a competitor to Flife, who is in much better shape, honestly. Fiesta Online is another MMO that utilizes large segregated zones, with zones being filled with monsters, treasures to find, and, well, yeah, you know, the norm. Back when I played Fiesta, this game was the pinnacle of anime graphics in the genre, and the combat was almost unrivaled for a game of its kind. And, even though it technically still isn't bad, it definitely has not aged very well. Regardless, with its tab target combat and very mid-2000s anime graphical style, you won't really get to experience a game like this anywhere else. Honestly, I don't think I've ever included Age of Conan in a top 10 video, not because it's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but because I had just kind of forgotten all about it until now. Don't get me wrong, this is not a forgettable game. This is probably one of the few MMOs that have actually left a lasting impression on me. I only scratched the surface of the game, honestly, investing less than 20 hours total into it over the course of my playthrough. However, I could tell exactly the kind of game it was, a brutal one. It was beautiful, it was bloody, it featured an interesting hybrid form of action and tab target combat, and was one of the first MMOs of its kind. But I wouldn't say this is necessarily an adult MMO. It's definitely targeted at adults and has a much more mature storyline than your average MMO. This one is in here because, well, you know, you guys know why this one is in here. It's probably one of the few MMOs of its kind and is actually, very surprisingly, a very solid title. Like most MMOs released within its time, Scarlet Blade has segregated zones. They're much smaller than the ones found in Final Fantasy XIV or Guild Wars 2, but still offer plenty of little quest hubs to seek out and take missions from. The combat is interestingly also a hybrid between tab target and free aim combat, as you can freely aim certain attacks and AoE without targets necessary, but at the same time, most of the class's main abilities also require targets, thus my classification of it being an interesting hybrid. The classes in the game are all pretty unique. They have fairly unique weapons in the armor. The armor in this game, the outfits in this game are ridiculous. While a very traditional sci-fi MMO for the most part, this definitely appeals to a certain type of gamer. I know some of you guys preferred the original Cabal over Cabal 2, and you know what? I'll probably include the original Cabal in a future video. But today, I want to go ahead and include Cabal 2 because I invested more time into this, and to me, this felt much more like a modern MMO that I could invest much more time into long term. Not because Cabal is a bad game, it's just much grindier, which is good in some instances, but with my lack of time these days, I find it easier to dedicate time to games like this. Cabal 2 is a pretty good looking game. You can make some solid looking characters, and the areas you get to explore are about what you'd expect. There's dungeons, there's open world content, and at the end of the day, this is a pretty basic, pretty traditional title as well. It also has tab target combat. Abilities can look pretty flashy depending on the class you choose. The best part, there are still players playing both Cabal and Cabal 2. I used to play this years ago, back when I had the patience to mindlessly grind. Yeah, who here remembers Metin 2? All of you should. I went back to the game a few months ago to record footage, and I spent so many hours grinding those wolves. So many wolves. After recording hours worth of arduous footage, my PC died and I lost everything, including all of my Tree of Savior footage. So I ended up scrapping both of those dedicated videos. But you know what? Rarely are games in this day and age this grindy, and that is part of the appeal of it. Sure, there are quests, but they don't necessarily do much in terms of progressing you forward. There's this auto grind feature in game though that you can actually pay for and set to grind for you, so you can be leveling AFK, which is what I may or may not have done. Combat is tab target, and graphically, the game definitely shows its age, but I'm gonna admit the free aim tab target was definitely ahead of its time and still wows me to this day. With the recent launch of Star Wars: The Old Republic onto Steam, I figured this is as good a time as any to go ahead and include this in a top 10 video, right? Now, don't hate me for saying this, but I have honestly never really played through all that much of The Old Republic. Mrs. Styx has, quite extensively. She actually played until endgame just a couple years ago and has a lot of experience in the game along with all of the characters, since she romanced quite a few of them. I always found that feature incredibly awkward to have in an MMO, because you're playing alongside potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other players, meaning there are, you know, quite a few of them in relationships with the very same NPC that you're technically in a relationship with as well. And I don't know, call me old-fashioned here, but I like my partner to be mine. The selling point for The Old Republic though is its story. The only game with a story that really captivated an audience this large is Final Fantasy XIV. So imagine this being the free alternative to 14's story. Although to access the most recent content, I do believe you have to pay, which is definitely a turn off to some players. Its tab target combat also feels a little bit dated from what I played through, but it has very large, very beautiful worlds to explore that more than makes up for it. I have got to include Perfect World in a list this year. This is my second MMO. This is the second MMO that I played full time all the way until endgame. I invested over 2 years of my life into this game, and I ended up spending thousands of dollars on it. To date, I do not regret a single moment. I played on the Sanctuary server back when Nefarious was almost in full control of the entire land back in 2007 through 2009, I think, after Legendary and Shockwave had all but fallen apart and ran one of the most powerful, most successful guilds on the entire server at the time. Yeah, you can guess how many fond memories I had in that game. It was the first open world PvP MMO that I had ever played, and after being killed, if you didn't have the necessary item, you would potentially lose gear upon death. But this is a very grindy game. We would spend hours grinding the same instances in Twilight Temple for materials for gear. We'd grind out monsters for hours in the open world for that few percent of extra XP, and for a game made when it was, not only is its incredibly large open world absolutely enormous, and with its new zones really impressive to look at, but its combat and skill effects are also very impressive. Although, at the end of the day, this is a perfect world entertainment game, and as such, the cash shop and pay to win is probably worse than you'll see in Black Desert Online. I've actually gotten a few requests to do a dedicated video on Prison Tale over the last couple months, and I'm not sure why. I first played this game back at the beginning of January 2017, and you know what? To me, it felt like a more anime-esque version of Metin 2. This game looks really old. Not like RuneScape or EverQuest old, but like an old PS1 JRPG. And thankfully, I loved old PS1 JRPGs, so this was right up my alley. Even though it looked noticeably dated, the character movement, the tab target combat, everything felt really high quality, much more so than in an MMO released back when this was. I'm not sure how large the world is or how many unique zones there are, but I know that we only explored a fraction of what it really had to offer. It's definitely an old school title that does not hold your hand at all and requires a lot of monster grinding to level, but it is highly rewarding to play. I'm gonna go ahead and include Lost Ark here because Mrs. Sticks and I have been streaming this over on Twitch every weekend for the last few weeks, and we have been having an absolute blast in it. Lost Ark is not your typical kind of MMO. It's an isometric title, which is something that I'm not really used to or overly fond of. I've liked a few isometric RPGs over the years, but it is not a type of game that I'm really drawn to. And the game doesn't have a global release currently either. Smilegate, the devs behind the game, are definitely working on it, but as of right now, the game is available in South Korea, Russia, and Japan. Although with the Japanese release having just taken place, the global release is being looked at next, so keep that in mind. This game is one of the smoothest MMOs I have played in recent memory. The action combat is very impressive, it looks incredible. Heck, the entire game looks incredible. There is so much to explore and a ton of features the further you get through the game. Honestly, when this launches globally, even though people claim they're never going to play it, they will, and this is going to be pretty big, at least for a while. But you know what? These are just 10 MMORPGs out of the many you can find online. There are hundreds of games available for you guys to play, and we have a selection of videos covering quite a few of them, with more videos coming out every single day. Now, what is your favorite free-to-play MMORPG, and what are you most looking forward to playing? Let me know down in the comments below, and let's talk about it. Anyway, guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.